I never believed in curses. Not really. Not until I saw what was waiting on the other side. It started as a game, a stupid dare on a cold night, nothing but laughter and flickering candlelight. But then, the laughter stopped. The air shifted, and I realized, too late, that something had been listening, watching, waiting. I tried to tell myself it wasn't real, that I imagined it. But the shadows move when I'm alone. The whispers slip through the silence. And every night, it gets closer. This isn't just a story. This is a warning. Because once you hear it, once you know what I know, it might start watching you too. I've always been drawn to the supernatural. Not in a scared way, more like fascinated. Ghost stories, urban legends, the kind of creepy tales that make your skin prickle. I ate them up, every single one. So when I stepped into this old curiosity shop, tucked between a closed-down bakery and a pawn shop that smelled like dust and regret, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The place was packed with oddities, twisted candles, jars filled with things that looked like dried-up roots but could have easily been something else, and books with no titles on their cracked leather spines. It was the kind of store that felt ancient, like it had always been there, waiting. And right there, on a shelf near the back, half hidden behind a stack of brittle newspapers, was the Ouija board. Not the kind you find at toy stores. No bright colors, no flimsy cardboard. This one was different. The wood was thick, polished, and covered in intricate carvings, like someone had spent years etching symbols into its surface. It looked expensive, heavy, real. I picked up the box, and something rattled inside. Not just the planchette, something else. When I opened it, there were 3 things inside. The planchette was smooth ivory, not plastic, and colder than it should have been. There was an empty picture frame, which made no sense, and a folded-up pamphlet that smelled like old paper and candle wax. The words printed across the top made me pause. User Manual. And beneath it, in a smaller, almost faded font, cheat sheet. A cheat sheet? For a Ouija board? I'd never heard of anything like that before. The whole point of a Ouija board was to ask questions and hope something answered. But this was like instructions. Like someone had figured out a way to control it. I glanced toward the front of the store, expecting the owner, some ancient, grumpy guy with a long beard, maybe, to be watching me, but no one was there. Just the faint hum of a radio playing some old song I didn't recognize. I turned back to the pamphlet, my pulse quickening as I unfolded the brittle paper. The writing was neat but strange, the kind of script that felt older than the ink used to print it. And there, listed in careful, precise instructions, were the cheat codes. Commands. Things you could say that would force the board to respond in ways it wasn't supposed to. I let out a slow breath, my fingers gripping the edges of the paper. This was ridiculous. It had to be a joke. Some kind of marketing gimmick to make the board seem more mysterious. But even as I thought that, my hands itched to buy it. To take it home and try it out. I didn't even check the price. I just walked up to the counter, put the box down, and waited. After a moment, a voice drifted from the back room. That's an interesting choice. I turned my head, expecting to see the store owner, but instead, a woman stepped out. She was younger than I expected, maybe in her 40s, with sharp eyes that looked me over like she already knew too much about me. "Yeah," I said, clearing my throat. "It's cool." Her lips twitched like she wanted to smile but didn't. "You read the paper inside?" I hesitated. "Yeah." She nodded slowly. "Do yourself a favor. Follow the rules." Something about the way she said it, calm, flat, like a warning, not advice, made the back of my neck prickle. I gave a half-hearted chuckle, because what else was I supposed to do? "Yeah, sure." She didn't laugh. Just rang me up, slid the box into a bag, and handed it over like she was glad to be rid of it. I should have walked out of that shop and thrown the damn thing away. I should have listened to the way her voice dropped just slightly, like she knew something I didn't. But I didn't. I took the board home. And that night, I broke every rule. I waited until it was late. Not just night, but the kind of quiet that settles in when the world feels empty. No cars outside, no voices drifting through the walls. Just me, the Ouija board, and the so-called cheat sheet. I set everything up carefully, like following a recipe. Board in front of me, planchette in the center, that strange empty picture frame propped up against a stack of books. I wasn't expecting much. Honestly, I was half convinced the whole thing was just some elaborate gimmick, but that didn't mean I wasn't curious. The instructions were specific. Use the birth and death dates of the spirit you want to contact. It didn't say why, but that's how these things always were, vague enough to make you wonder if you were missing something. I figured I'd start small. Nothing dramatic. No long-lost relatives or historic figures. Just scratches. The family cat. He'd been gone for a while, but I still remembered his dates. August 12, 2011 to July 3, 2019. I moved the planchette slowly, pressing each number, spelling out his name like it actually mattered. At first, nothing happened. No gust of wind, no flickering lights. Just silence. I tried again. Nothing. On the third attempt, I sighed and was about to give up when I noticed it. The frame. The glass wasn't reflecting the room anymore. It had gone cloudy, like someone had breathed on it from the inside. I leaned closer, my pulse picking up. The mist swirled, thickening, shifting in slow, deliberate motions. And then, a shape. Small, curled up, just barely visible through the fog. I froze. My brain scrambled for an explanation, something logical, something I could brush off. Maybe it was a trick of the glass. Maybe my eyes were playing games with me. But the shape moved. Uncurling, stretching. I could almost make out fur. Ears. A tail. Scratches. My voice came out quieter than I meant. The mist shuddered, the shape tilting, as if looking at me. A chill ran down my arms. This was stupid. I knew that. It was just a game. A trick of the mind. I should have laughed it off, put everything away, and gone to bed. Instead, I reached out. The moment my fingers brushed the frame, the mist pulled back, like ink dissolving in water. The shape disappeared, leaving nothing but an empty pane of glass and my own wide-eyed reflection staring back. I sat there for a long time, heart thudding. This wasn't normal. This wasn't just some party trick. The board had done something. And I wasn't done testing it. I should have stopped. I knew that. After scratches, I told myself it was just a one-time thing. A weird fluke, a glitch in reality that I shouldn't press too hard against. But that curiosity, the same one that made me buy the board in the first place, was already digging in. I needed to know more. It started with simple names. Family members. Distant relatives. I combed through old records, pretending it was for some harmless genealogy project. In reality, I was collecting dates, births, deaths, lining them up like pieces to a puzzle I wasn't even sure existed. Each time, the frame reacted differently. Sometimes, the mist would just swirl, thick and heavy, giving me nothing. Other times, I'd get glimpses, faces barely visible, staring out from the fog with hollow expressions. And then, there were the ones that changed everything. The first time I saw beyond the mist, I thought my mind was breaking. It wasn't just faces anymore. The fog parted like curtains, revealing a world that should not have been there. I saw a city, not like anything built by human hands, but vast and endless, stretching into a sky that flickered between colors I couldn't name. The buildings weren't solid. They shimmered, shifting between shapes, as if deciding what they wanted to be. Some looked like ruins, crumbling towers swallowed by vines. Others were pristine, glowing with an eerie, bluish-white light. And the figures, They walked on bridges made of nothing, suspended in midair, their steps silent, their bodies translucent. Some drifted, weightless, like they were carried by an unseen current. Others stood still, watching. I could feel their eyes on me even though I couldn't make out their faces. I should have been afraid. Every instinct told me to stop. But the more I saw, the harder it became to look away. I started testing limits. How long could I watch before the vision faded? Could I change what I saw? Was there a pattern to who appeared? The board had rules, but they weren't the ones I thought. It wasn't just about names and dates anymore. It was about intent. About what I wanted, what I was willing to risk. And then one night, I saw something I was never meant to see. The city was there, but it wasn't still. It was moving. Buildings shifting faster, twisting, collapsing, and reforming. The bridges weren't just floating anymore. They were unraveling, stretching out, reaching. The figures, they were looking at me. Really looking. One of them stepped closer. I couldn't move. My fingers were frozen on the planchette, my breath locked in my chest. The mist in the frame started to bleed outward, spilling onto the table, curling around my hands. The shape in the glass grew sharper. More solid. Too solid. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't just a glimpse into something far away. Something was looking back, and it wanted out. I was running on empty. I hadn't slept properly in days, maybe weeks. Time felt strange, slipping past in a blur of flickering candlelight and the constant, gnawing need to see more, to understand more. I told myself I was in control, that I could stop any time I wanted. But I knew that wasn't true. That night, I told myself it would be the last session. One more, then I'd pack everything away. Maybe even burn the board, just to be sure. I just needed to satisfy that last bit of curiosity, answer the final questions rattling around in my brain. I sat down, placed my fingers on the planchette, and took a deep breath. The candle flames trembled slightly, but I barely noticed. By now, I was used to small things shifting when I worked. The room always felt heavier, like the air itself was pressing down on me, thick and humming with something I couldn't explain. I started the sequence. Name. Birth date. Death date. The frame remained blank. No mist, no movement. Just an empty void staring back at me. I tried again. Slower this time. More deliberate. Still nothing. A strange frustration bubbled up inside me. I had seen things I couldn't explain, things that shouldn't have been possible. But now, at the final stretch, it was like the board had decided to shut me out. I exhaled sharply and, without thinking, I shifted the planchette, tracing over the carved letters on the board. The moment I touched it, I felt something shift, like a wire being tripped. A sudden, invisible pull that sent a cold jolt up my arms. My breath hitched. My fingers froze. I hadn't meant to do that. I wasn't spelling anything. I wasn't asking a question. But the board, it reacted. The picture frame, silent and empty just moments ago, exploded with movement. The mist didn't swirl this time. It convulsed, writhing, twisting in ways that made my stomach churn. It was thick, darker than before, stretching beyond the glass like ink spilled in water. I tried to move my hands away, but they wouldn't listen. My fingers felt glued to the planchette, locked in place by something unseen. Then, the mist shifted. A shape began to form. Not distant and hazy like the others. This was closer. Too close. I could see the outline of a face, long, thin, stretched in a way that didn't feel right. The eyes, they weren't hollow like before. They were deep, a bottomless, consuming black, and they were looking straight at me. I don't remember if I spoke, if I screamed, but I remember the whisper. Not from the board, not from the frame, from behind me. right against my ear. A single word. A name. My name. And then, the candlelight went out. I couldn't breathe. The whisper still clung to the air, curling around my ears like smoke, my name stretching longer than it should have. I wanted to turn, to see what was behind me, but something deep in my gut screamed not to. In the frame, the mist churned violently. It wasn't forming a city this time. No flickering souls, no bridges, no light. Just darkness, thick, suffocating, swallowing everything inside the glass. And then, out of that void, something began to take shape. It wasn't my grandmother. It wasn't any of the names I had called. The face was wrong. Stretched too thin, mouth too wide, eyes so black they felt like holes, pulling me in. It wasn't staring at me. It was studying me. I wanted to move. To close the board, to throw the frame across the room, to do anything but sit there like a trapped animal. But my hands were useless. My body felt cold, detached, like I was a passenger inside my own skin. Then, the figure inside the glass twitched. Not a normal movement. Not slow. Not human. 1 second, it was still. The next, its head snapped to the side in a blur. Its mouth stretched wider. And it smiled. The pressure in the room changed. My ears popped. A thin, jagged line split across the glass, running through the figure's face. It didn't flinch. If anything, it seemed amused. The crack deepened, splintering like ice under pressure, spreading in all directions. Then, with a sound like bones snapping, the glass exploded. Shards rained down, glinting in the weak candlelight. But the mist, God, the mist didn't stay trapped. It poured out, thick and slow, spreading across the table like an ink spill. I scrambled back, chair screeching against the floor, but the mist kept moving, climbing, rising, and in the middle of it, those eyes. Still there. Still watching. Still smiling. The candle nearest to me flickered violently. The flame stretched tall, then snuffed out completely. The room plunged into uneven darkness, my breathing the only thing I could hear, until it wasn't. A shuffle. Behind me. Closer. I didn't turn. I couldn't. Then, in the silence, something exhaled. Right against my neck. I shoved the board into the closet, pressing it back against the wall, behind old coats and forgotten boxes. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the doorknob, but I forced it shut. Pressing against the wood like that would somehow keep everything inside. Keep it locked away. Keep it from reaching me. It was over. It had to be over. I sat on the edge of my bed, head in my hands, forcing myself to breathe. The room was silent now, but not in the way it should have been. It wasn't peace. It wasn't relief. It was the kind of quiet that made my ears ring, like something was waiting for me to notice it. I didn't want to notice anything else. That night, I barely slept. Every time my eyes shut, I saw that face, staring at me through the glass, through the mist, through whatever was left of the thing I had let in. My dreams weren't dreams at all. They were glimpses. Flickers of movement just outside my vision. The feeling of someone watching, just beyond the veil of sleep, waiting for me to slip under long enough for them to step closer. Morning didn't feel real when it came. The sunlight didn't make anything better. I told myself it was over. That the board was just a board, that the broken frame was just broken glass, that I had scared myself into believing something had gotten out. And then I saw my phone. It was lying face up on my nightstand, screen black, a faint smudge in the center. A fingerprint. Too large to be mine. I hadn't touched it all night. I reached for it, hesitating before my fingers brushed the surface. The screen lit up. A photo. I didn't take it. The timestamp read 3:14 a.m. I stared at it, trying to understand, trying to process what I was looking at. It wasn't my room. It wasn't even my house. It was a hallway. A long, dark hallway stretching into nothing, with doors on either side. One door was open, and standing in the doorway was me. I was facing the camera, eyes half-lidded, mouth slightly open, like I had just woken up. But the worst part, the part that made my stomach turn and my fingers go numb, was the shadow behind me. It was taller than me, and it was smiling. I don't touch the board anymore. I don't talk about it. I don't even open that closet door unless I have to. But the thing is, I don't think that matters, because it saw me, and now it knows where to find me. I don't go near the closet anymore. It's been weeks, maybe months, I don't know. Time feels strange now. Some days, I wake up and swear the board is still in my hands, the planchette moving beneath my fingertips, spelling things I don't want to understand. Other days, I convince myself it was all in my head. A trick of the light. An overactive imagination. But then I hear it. At first, I thought it was the house settling. That's what people say when they don't want to admit something feels wrong. Just the house settling. Just the pipes. Just your mind playing tricks on you. But houses don't whisper. Pipes don't call your name. And tricks don't leave footprints in the dust when no one else has been inside. I tried getting rid of it. Of course I did. I took the box, the board, the shattered frame, everything, and drove out to the middle of nowhere. Dug a hole. Buried it deep. I stood there, staring at the disturbed earth, waiting to feel different. Waiting to feel free. I felt nothing. That night, I woke up to the sound of my closet door creaking open. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just lay there, listening, my breath shallow, my heartbeat too loud in my ears. The air felt thick, heavy, like something was in the room with me, standing right there in the dark. Watching. I told myself not to look. I told myself if I stayed still, if I didn't acknowledge it, maybe it would go away. And then I heard the whisper. Not from the closet. From right beside my bed. A single breath. A voice, too close, too wrong. Never. Use. Cheat codes. The next morning, the closet door was shut. Nothing was out of place. Everything looked normal. But I knew. I knew I hadn't imagined it. Because when I reached for my phone, there was another picture waiting for me. It wasn't the hallway this time. It wasn't me standing in some impossible place. It was my bedroom, taken from the foot of my bed. And there, right in the corner, was the closet door, wide open. And in the darkness beyond it, something looking back. I don't know how this ends. I don't think it does. Some doors should never be opened. Some games should never be played. And most of all, some things never leave once they've been let in. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more eerie tales. Turn on notifications, if you dare. And remember, some truths are better left undiscovered. Some doors should stay closed. Some whispers should never be answered. But if you listen closely, maybe you'll hear them anyway.